All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're taking a deep dive into something that affects every single one of us, traffic accidents in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
And
Good topic.
yeah, a big one. And, we always hear that traffic accidents are a major cause of death and injury, but I don't think we always stop to think about, who those people are.
The demographics, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to try to get into that a little bit today.
Looking at some good data, some interesting data.
Yeah, so the source we're looking at today is an analysis of U.S. traffic accident casualties.
Okay.
Broken down by age and gender.
Yeah, and it's presented in a really cool way, too.
Yeah.
A back-to-back bar chart.
Yeah, it makes it really easy to compare.
Easy to compare.
Men and women.
Yep, across the lifespan, so you can really see the trends. Yeah.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Watch them all drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
So we have this really comprehensive analysis that we're going to be referencing today. It's called Understanding Traffic Accident Casualties in the United States, a comprehensive analysis by age and gender.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah. So, obviously traffic accidents are a major concern and we all want to be safe out there on the roads. But what's really fascinating is that the study found that certain age groups and genders are actually disproportionately affected.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, you might think okay, yeah, I know I got to be safe on the road and wear my seatbelt and all that stuff.
Right.
But it's actually, there are other things going on that, when you look at the numbers and, you kind of look at the data, it actually can be quite eye-opening.
Huh.
So one of the things that just kind of jumps out at you right away is there's this bar chart in the study, and it compares casualty rates. And by casualty rates, they mean, the number of people who are killed or seriously injured.
Okay.
And it compares that across different age groups and genders.
Okay.
And it's just bam, right in your face. It's wow, males have higher casualty rates.
Really?
Across every single age group.
Wow, every single one.
You might think, oh, well, maybe, this age group, men and women are similar, but, this other age group is where it really diverges.
Right.
But it's every single one.
Wow. That's kind of wild.
Mm-hmm.
Do they, does the study give any ideas as to why that would be?
Yeah, so that's what's really interesting, and that's what we're going to kind of try to unpack today.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
It makes you wonder, is it simply that men just drive more,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe they just log more hours on the road.
Or are there, maybe some behavioral and social factors, too, that are contributing to this pretty stark difference?
Right, because I feel anecdotally, you hear about those stereotypical, reckless young male drivers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the study actually breaks it down by age,
Okay.
which is, even more interesting.
Okay.
So, for example, both men and women see this peak in casualty rates in the young adult range.
Right.
So between 20 and 24.
Okay. So right out of college, kind of.
Yeah. Right when they're getting the freedom, they're, getting out there on the roads on their own, maybe they just graduated, maybe they've been working for a couple of years, they're,
Right.
they're feeling good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that peak for young men in particular is very, very pronounced.
Oh, really?
So the casualty rate for males in that 20 to 24 age group is significantly higher than any other age group.
Uh-huh.
And it's drastically different from the rate for women in that same age range.
Wow, that's a big difference. So I get that, obviously inexperience probably plays a role there.
Right.
But it seems with a difference that big, there's got to be something else going on too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What could that be?
It makes you think about, all the different factors that, are associated with being a young adult, especially for young men. So, you think about it, they do have less experience behind the wheel, Maybe they have a feeling of, invincibility.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe some, social pressures to take risks,
Right. Yeah, definitely. Like, especially in that age group.
Yeah.
Like, guys want to show off for their friends or whatever.
Yeah.
There's that whole thing about, like, fast cars and driving fast being, like, cool or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a stereotype.
Yeah.
But maybe there's some truth to it.
Right. And it's interesting because, like, it's not even just like a conscious, decision to be risky all the time. Like, biologically speaking,
Oh, yeah.
the part of the brain that controls impulse control
Yeah.
doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s.
Oh, wow. So literally their brains aren't fully formed yet.
Right. Yeah.
And they're out there driving these, like, powerful machines.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
So it's almost like a perfect storm
Yeah.
for young men in their early 20s, where you have these biological, social, and experiential factors that all kind of combine
Yeah.
to create this, higher risk environment.
It's like all the ingredients for disaster almost.
Right. So we have this peak, right, in young adulthood. And then, thankfully, things start to shift
Okay.
as people get a little bit older. So as we move into those middle-aged groups, ages 30 to 64.
Okay, so things start to calm down a little bit.
Yeah. So we actually see this steady decline in casualty rates for both men and women during those middle years.
Okay.
And, again, it's probably a combination of factors, but, people are getting older. They have more driving experience. They're becoming more cautious.
Makes sense.
And, they might have families, more responsibilities.
Yeah, kids, mortgage, all that stuff.
Right. That make them, think twice about taking risks.
Definitely. When you have others depending on you, it changes your perspective.
Right. So, it's not to say that accidents don't happen. Obviously they still do.
Right.
But statistically speaking, those middle years tend to be a safer period on the road.
Okay.
For both genders.
It's good to hear. So it's not all doom and gloom.
No. But then as we enter the senior years,
Okay.
70 and above,
Uh-oh.
we see another shift.
Really? Back up again.
Yeah. So the casualty rates actually climb again.
Oh.
For both men and women in the 70-plus age bracket. And, men still, unfortunately, have higher rates overall.
So even in the older age groups, that gap is still there.
Yes.
Huh. That's surprising.
It makes sense when you think about, the physical and cognitive changes that come with aging. So things like slower reaction times,
Okay.
decreased vision,
Yeah.
potential cognitive decline.
Right.
Can all make driving more challenging.
Definitely. I mean, everyone ages differently, but it's true that those things can become more of a factor if you get older.
Yeah. And it's important to acknowledge that, obviously many seniors are very cautious,
Of course.
experienced drivers.
Yeah.
But these age-related changes, they do increase the likelihood of accidents.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because of frailty, older adults are also more likely to sustain serious injuries in a crash.
Right. Their bodies are just more vulnerable.
Exactly.
So it's like a double whammy almost.
Right. So it's a complex issue. Seniors often take steps to try to mitigate their risks. So like driving less at night, avoiding busy highways. But even small errors can have bigger consequences for them.
That makes sense. So we've talked about younger drivers. We've talked about middle-aged drivers. We've talked about senior drivers. What about the youngest folks on the road, the kids? What does this analysis say about children under 14?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, as you might expect, children have significantly lower casualty rates. Obviously they're not driving themselves. They're under the supervision of adults. And there are all sorts of, safety regulations in place, like child restraint systems, car seats, booster seats, school bus safety measures, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's really important to remember that even though their rates are lower, they're not insignificant.
Yeah, they're still vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, they're completely dependent on the adults around them to keep them safe.
Right. So things like improper car seat installation, failing to properly buckle your child into their car seat or their booster seat can still put them at risk. So while the data shows that, thankfully, statistically speaking, children are safer than other age groups, it's still so important to be vigilant and make sure that you're practicing proper safety.
Absolutely. I mean, every passenger deserves the highest level of safety, no matter how old they are.
Yeah. So, okay, so we've established this clear difference, right, between, casualty rates for men and women. And we've kind of seen how those rates fluctuate across different age groups.
Yeah.
But this kind of brings up another question, like why? Why are men, especially young men, overrepresented in these statistics?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. We've kind of touched on some possible explanations like, inexperience, social pressures, but it seems like there must be more to it than that. What else is going on here?
Yeah, so let's get into that.
So when we really start digging into the data, some interesting patterns emerge that help explain these differences in casualty rates between men and women.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about, those young men, particularly those aged like 15 to 29, they are just way more prone to risk-taking behavior.
Yeah, it's almost like that stereotype, of like young and reckless.
Right.
But the study's actually like giving us data that supports that.
Yeah, exactly. So statistically, young men are much more likely to speed. They engage in like aggressive maneuvers like tailgating or weaving in and out of traffic. And sadly, they're also much more likely to drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs.
And obviously, those types of behaviors are going to be linked to higher accident rates.
For sure.
But I feel like it's not just about individual actions.
Right.
We have to think about like the types of vehicles that men are more likely to drive to,
Yeah.
how much time they're spending on the road.
You're absolutely right. So vehicle choice and exposure levels definitely play a significant role. So, for example, men are much more likely to ride motorcycles,
Yeah.
which are inherently more dangerous than cars.
Right.
And they're also more likely to drive larger vehicles like trucks and SUVs, both for work and for, leisure.
Yeah, if you think about it, professions that require a lot of driving, like, truck drivers, delivery services, even construction workers, a lot of those fields tend to be very male-dominated.
Exactly. So it's not just about individual recklessness. It's about the types of vehicles that men are drawn to and the fact that, their work or their hobbies just involve more driving in general.
Right.
And when you combine all those factors, the types of vehicles, the amount of driving they're doing,
Yeah.
with the tendency for risk-taking behavior, it creates a much higher overall risk profile.
Right. Okay, so that sheds light on the reasons why men, especially young men, have higher casualty rates. But what about women? What are they doing that's resulting in these consistently lower rates?
That's a great question. And, the data seems to suggest that women in general tend to just engage in much safer driving behaviors.
Okay.
They're more likely to wear seatbelts, less likely to speed or drive under the influence, and they tend to just be more cautious drivers overall.
Is it really like as simple as saying that, women have a lower need for speed, or is there something else? Like, is there more to it than that?
I think it's definitely more nuanced than that. So we have to consider like the roles and responsibilities that women often take on, especially as they get older.
Okay.
So, for example, they may be more likely to be the primary caregivers for children
Yeah.
or aging parents,
Mm-hmm.
which means that they're driving more cautiously because they've got, precious cargo on board.
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking your kids to school or you're driving your, elderly parent to a doctor's appointment, you're going to be extra careful.
Exactly. It's not just about like individual personality traits.
Yeah.
It's about the context of their lives,
Yeah.
the responsibilities that they carry. Women are also more likely to, choose to drive less at night or maybe during, rush hour when things are a little more hectic.
Yeah.
So, that also kind of reduces their exposure to potentially risky situations.
It's fascinating how those like social and cultural factors can actually have such a tangible impact on driving behaviors.
Right.
And then ultimately on, safety outcomes. So we talked about like individual choices. We talked about societal norms. We even talked about biological factors a little bit.
Yeah.
Are there any other pieces to this puzzle? Anything else that might help explain these, really interesting trends?
Well, one factor that we haven't touched on yet is the impact of, all the vehicle safety features that have evolved over time.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Cars today have like so many crazy safety features
I know.
that didn't even exist a couple decades ago. Like we've got airbags, anti-lock brakes, electronic stability control, and now there's like lane departure warnings and automatic emergency braking. It's mind-blowing.
It really is. And those advancements have undoubtedly made driving safer for everyone. But it's interesting to note that even though we have all these like incredible safety improvements, the gender gap in casualty rates has actually remained fairly consistent over time.
That is super surprising. I would think that, with safer cars, the differences between, male and female drivers would start to like shrink or something. But it sounds like maybe those underlying behavioral and social factors that we've been talking about are still very much in play.
Yeah, it really underscores the complexity of this issue.
Yeah.
Technology can only do so much. At the end of the day, it really comes down to human behavior
Yeah.
and the choices that we make when we get behind the wheel.
So where do we go from here? We've unpacked the data, we've kind of explored the why, we've even touched on the role of technology. What are the key takeaways for our listeners? Like, what can we actually do with this information? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've been talking about age, gender, behavior, technology, all this stuff swirling around when we talk about traffic accidents. I think for me, the biggest takeaway is, knowledge is power. Like when you understand these patterns
Right.
and you understand what contributes to them, then we can start making better decisions.
Yeah.
Both individually and, as a society.
Absolutely. And, it wasn't just about, throwing statistics around. It was really about kind of prompting some reflection and maybe encouraging some action.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk solutions. We know that certain groups are more at risk, right? So what can we do to actually address those specific challenges and, make the road safer for everyone?
Well, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We need to look at these groups individually.
Yeah.
So for young men, for example, there are programs that address risk-taking behaviors, that promote responsible driving habits.
Yeah.
And, they try to challenge those harmful social norms we talked about around masculinity and driving.
Yeah.
And those programs can be really effective.
Yeah, it's not just about handing out tickets and,
Right.
punishing people. It's about changing those attitudes and behaviors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We also need to think about stricter graduated licensing systems for young drivers. So, maybe extending that permit phase.
Yeah.
Requiring more supervised driving hours. Or even, implementing curfews for new drivers.
Okay.
That could help.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't forget about DUI laws.
Right.
Enforcing those rigorously is absolutely crucial.
And what about older drivers? What can we do to help support them?
Well, for older adults, the challenges are different. So we need to approach things differently. So first of all, encouraging regular medical checkups, making sure their vision is okay, that their cognitive function is good, checking for any physical limitations.
Yeah.
That's a really good starting point. We can also promote programs that offer refresher courses, just to brush up on those driving skills.
Yeah.
Learn some new techniques, adapted for seniors.
Yeah, I've even heard of some communities that offer transportation services specifically for seniors.
Oh, yeah.
Which would help them reduce their reliance on driving altogether.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's a good option for folks who just aren't as comfortable behind the wheel anymore.
Right. And, we can't forget about the role of those vehicle safety features we talked about. We got to keep pushing those.
Yeah.
Advancing technologies like automatic emergency braking, lane departure warnings, and blind spot detection systems, they're just going to benefit drivers of all ages.
Right. I mean, those things really can be lifesavers. But even with all those programs and policies and technology in place, we can't forget about individual responsibility.
Absolutely. Every single time we get behind the wheel, we're making a choice.
Right.
A choice to drive safely, obey the laws, be aware of our surroundings, put our phones down. And those choices, they don't just affect us.
Right.
They affect everyone around us.
So listeners, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. The data is important, the trends are insightful, but it's really the choices that we make when we're behind the wheel that ultimately determine our safety and the safety of those around us.
So drive safely, be responsible, and look out for each other.
Yeah.
Let's all do our part to create a safer road environment for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.